Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the seventh rule. Mr. ARMIN SHIMERMAN has joined us for this deep dive. And before we hit record, ARMIN had some really cool questions, and we want to talk about them. Thanks for joining us, ARMIN. Take it away, please.
Thank you. And forgive me, my dogs are seeing something outside the window, so they want to join in as well. But the question I wanted to ask both Melissa and CIRROC is a question that, as an actor, I'm fascinated by, which is what material did Melissa, what did material did Aaron have to do in order to audition for the role of Nog?
Yeah, so he was initially given because the first question he got asked was, do you know what a Ferengi is? And he said no. So David Livingston gave him a copy of The Last Outpost.
David Livingston was one of the producers and one of our directors, yes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Go ahead.
And along with the copy of the script. So he got a lot of his mannerisms in the first episode from watching The Last Outpost, and I believe the scene that he auditioned with, and the first scene that he was involved in shooting was actually in a future episode, A Man Alone, where he meets Jake for the first time, and so he read the script, and in his audition, he was asked, so how do you feel about having a worm in your belly? And Aaron goes, no, I don't have a worm in my belly. That's a trill. I'm playing a Ferengi. And I believe it was David Livingston. He's like, that helped nail the job for you. And not only the mannerisms, but he did his own work, and it was obvious that he had prepared for his audition. So those two things, I think, helped land him the job. So do your homework.
Great advice.
It's interesting to me that they were interested in seeing the relationship between Nog and Jake. That was really important to them, as it always was during the course of the show. So I turn the spotlight on you now, CIRROC. What did you have to audition with in order to get the role, and how many times did you audition?
I think I auditioned 3 different times. I think it was 3 times. And I do remember auditioning the scene that we do on the bridge, the fishing scene, the fishing scene, which is why on the first day of shoot, I felt super comfortable because I had already known, once you know all the material and you audition that material, and that's what you have to film first, you really feel comfortable. You're like, oh yeah, no, I know where I'm at. I know what's going on. I mean, a little direction here and there, wardrobe adjustments or whatever, but ultimately, as far as knowledge of the scene, you went over it 100 times already, during the audition process.
This was the first time you were working with Avery, right?
Yes. I auditioned in the final audition with Avery. He was in the final audition. Yeah, so I did get a chance to read with him in that final audition. And later on, he told me something that I don't remember, but he said that as soon as I walked into the audition, I ran up, I said, hey, Dad. And I ran up to him, gave him a big hug. And he was like, he said, who's this kid? Like, I just run up to this guy and give him a hug.
That's your future castmate.
That was
right then and there.
My dad. That was my dad. So, of course, I knew which one was going to be my dad when I walked in the room. It was pretty obvious,
What if you ran up and hugged David Livingston?
Yeah. I wouldn't have worked as well. But so no. And then he says,
I don't think David Livingston would have allowed you to hug him. So
yeah. No, but the thing was, he said, as he was hugging me, he said, "This guy's got cologne on," because I used to wear a lot of cologne at a young age. So here I am, 13, walking in there with a collared shirt and cologne, and he's like, "Who the hell is this guy?"
So cute.
And so that's the audition. Now you're doing the fishing scene. How did Avery start that relationship that was so super, not only on screen, but off screen? How did that start?
It started by him making me feel like it was the two of us against whatever, it was us versus the camera. It was us versus the story or the script. It was us versus the moment in the situation, but it was us though. So when they cut, he doesn't do what some actors do and just kind of go into their own bubble and walk away and looking for their own adjustments and make up a wardrobe. He was staying there with me in those moments while they're lighting or whatnot and talking with me and making me feel super comfortable. Like he's there for me, like it's us. And I remember that feeling from right away. I was like, oh, so it's us. So that made me feel like if I had anything, questions or felt any kind of way, I'm going to go to him with it versus anybody else. Right.
It's telling
right away,
that
it was like,
it's telling that Armin, as a theater teacher, is nodding vehemently when you're saying this. He's like, "This is exactly right. This is it."
Well, it was the beginning of one of the high points. One of the most important things about our show was the relationship between Cisco and Jake, and we all were aware of it. We were all astounded by it because it was such a loving thing. It was just, we all were aware of that really early on, and I wanted to know how that started because, as you said, you were strangers when you ran in and gave him a hug, said Dad. And I would assume, I'm going to make the assumption that Avery was not yet cast when he was in the room with you, that he had not been cast at that moment. But already he was in the process of forming a relationship with the young man that is you.
Yeah. I don't know what the situation was on the other end. I just know that in that moment, the chemistry felt right, and I understood what my role was, much like Aaron understood what his role is in this whole story, and that's how I was approaching it. Like, okay, just your mom dies, you don't want to be living on the space station. You really want to know if there's other kids there. Are you going to be alone? I think they mentioned that in this episode. One of the lines was, are there going to be other kids there?
And your dad says, there be lots of them. It's like, they're like 11.
Yeah, there weren't lots.
And I can't tell you how many episodes I thought Aaron was your age. I thought that for 3 or 4 episodes. I really did think Aaron was, because I'd never seen him out of makeup. And I just assumed he was 13, 14, or 15 or 16, but no more than 16.
Yeah. I did too, by the way. Young. The both of us did. So I felt the same way. No, I did too. I felt like I had another kid there that was going through the same thing as me, except he had to wear this whole thing, and that made it even worse for him. So I was like, well, you know what? It's not so bad. There's a kid who's got it worse than me. and then I see him out of makeup, and I'm like, he says hello, and I'm like, who? I gave him the look like, I don't know who you are, And he's like, you don't remember me, And he starts playing with you because he knows that I don't know. And he says, you don't remember me? I'm like, you don't know who I am? I'm like, I'm sorry, man. I don't. He's like,
are these the crazy Star Trek fans I've been hearing about?
Yeah. He's like, it's me, Nog. And I'm like, Nog? You're like an adult, bro. I couldn't believe it.
That was a surprise to me too, and really. But let's go back, if I may. Sorry to monopolize the questions here, but Melissa, what did Aaron think after shooting the pilot? I know Aaron well enough to know that he must have felt a little trepidatious about the whole thing. That he was sure that he hadn't done as good a job as he had hoped to do. He always felt that way, and he was always wrong. He always did a terrific job. So, did he feel during the pilot that he had done what he set out to do?
Hmm.
I I don't know if he felt that he had set out what he had planned or hoped to do, because as you said, he was his own worst critic. So there was always something that he felt he could have done better, or prepared better for. But ultimately, at the end of the day, rewatching this episode, I think he was proud of the work he did.
Mhm.
Looking at it from a more mature perspective, and seeing what he had accomplished at such a young age. I mean, he was 23 when he started Deep Space Nine, playing this little kid, um, but still, he was still a child in a way, in his own right, when he started the show. So initially, I don't know that he would have said that he did a great job, but he was always hopeful, and that always made him work as hard as he possibly could, so
Well, I
that they
remember
would bring him
working with
back.
him early on, and was really impressed by his work. Just really impressed. And again, I just assumed he was 15 or 16. I didn't think he would be 23. And my mistake, my bad, as we said on Buffy. Um, um, but he it was just a joy to work with. And then as I got to know you better, CIRROC, you too. I mean, the scenes where they were kind enough to put you in my bar and you were interviewing me and as one character to another character, those were some of my favorite scenes I ever did in the show. So
Armin, I was watching you in this, like, there was a moment where you first come on camera, the first time we see Quark on Deep Space Nine, and you're cleaning up your bar from a mess. I guess, the mess was everywhere. The whole place is in tatters, but Cisco's walking on. He's getting the kind of introduction. This is the ship and this is the place. You're already there. You're not only there, but you're ready to leave. You're like, I've been here, done that. There's no more juice in this lemon, and I've squeezed it all out. I'm ready to get out of here. And that's one thing on this rewatch that I didn't notice before, was how they actually literally make you the community leader. Essentially the life. Yeah, you're the lifeblood of the promenade. Like the ship, the station is dead without Quark. So you're the heart of it. You're the lifeblood of the life of the station. I basically said the life of the station. And they mentioned that right away early on. And I want to know, was there more discussion about Quark really being the life of the state? There is no energy there without you, essentially. Once you start picking up the energy, everyone else feeds off of it.
well, I don't know what was in the writers' heads. As you know, the writers and the actors didn't really see each other until the third season. Thank you, Mr. Berman. Um, and but I do know, ironically, the very words you just said are almost word for word what Ira said to me in the last episode, which was the reason you're still on the ship is that you are the ship, you are the heart and soul. Not me, not Armin, but Quark is the heart and soul of the ship. And so yes, I guess that was always part and parcel of how they saw it. Certainly, I was grateful because if that's true, that's why so many scenes took place in Quark's bar. Not so much to feature Quark, but to feature the other characters having a tete-a-tetes with each other about what they're going to do next in each episode. And it was comfortable for them to be in Quark's bar, to hobnob and come up with strategy. Certainly, it was the resting place for a lot of people to come and just relax.
Another thing they set in stone with this first episode is the gamesmanship between Quark and Cisco. He's leveraging the release of Nog.
They're sizing each other up too a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and that continues to go on throughout the show. I feel like this is the beginning of that. You see that. Well, you got to let me go. If I don't do this, then I won't get that. You know, there's this always back and forth between Cisco and Quark. Like, well, I see you're in a predicament there. You might need some help. You know.
Yeah, it's true. That was set up in the first episode. I would differ with what you said and say that in my memory, which is getting faded as the years go by, there weren't that many scenes with Quark and Cisco. There weren't that many, and I attribute to that, and that's my point of view, not necessarily anybody else's, is that in order for Quark to survive on the show and not get locked up or penalized for some of the activities that he took part in, you had to keep him away from Cisco, because if Cisco didn't catch him continually at what he was doing nefariously, that would make Cisco look less competent. And so in order to keep Cisco's authority, he leave it to Odo to catch Quark, but don't leave it to Cisco, because if he misses something, that says something about his ability to be the commander in chief of the station.
That's a good
And
point.
you allude
also,
to that. Yeah.
Also, Cisco has his mind on other things outward.
Yeah, he doesn't want to worry about a tiny little rank. Yeah.
But there's an allusion to that in the episode. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Melissa. Yeah.
No, you can continue your thought, because this kind of segues back
stay
to
tuned for
else.
that.
No, I want to hear. I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say, because that confrontation between Cisco and Quark kind of lays the foundation for relationship as far as the Ferengi families go, and Ferengi family unit, because in order to leverage the release of his nephew, that must mean that family is very important to the Ferengi. Otherwise, he would be like, no, I'm still going. And which is a wonderful nugget to plant, the wonderful seed to plant for the future, and show us where the show is going. It is about relationship and family, and this is the most important overall story for the show, which I
think you're 100% right. It was always about family. You know, we have the Ciscos, we have the Ferengi family, we have the O'Brien family. Yep. We have other families that come in, but family was very important to the creation of this show, and it's because we weren't going anywhere. So you couldn't. It would be wrong to leave the family behind. And so the family was important into the makeup of these characters. And I think the characters are richer because we know their relationships with their family members.
Totally.
Where they can let their hair down and tell each other the secrets that are bothering them.
And their own interpersonal conflicts too. I mean, these are still real people that aren't just soldiers or scientists. They still have, a wife or a niece or a nephew or, dinner. Like it's great to see these kinds of moments and their conflicts and their storylines within the families.
And originally, just as a point of fact, there's no reason for CIRROC to remember, but in the original script, Rom did not have a name. He was simply Quark's brother.
I think
he was described as a family member.
I think it was right. Pit Boss, I think, was what it was called in the first scene or the first episode.
Right. He was called a Pit Boss. My mistake. He wasn't called Quark's brother. It's described. He says offhand, "I'm Quark's brother," but right. He had no name. It was simply Pit Boss. Yeah.
And he did have a little bit, another little snippet of a scene that I hadn't noticed in previous episodes, or at least I hadn't remembered. And it was when the Cardassians had won something. They're like, yeah, and they're all collecting stuff. And then in the little corner, in between all the Cardassians, you see Rom kind of like looking up like, boy, these guys are savages or something like that. We do have to jump to a break. I did want to point out very quickly that CIRROC, this might be, if you're talking about Griffith Park, and if that's the case, this might be the lake where you shot. Might look a little bit familiar. That kind of tree.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Armin Shimerman, of course, on the seventh rule.